In this episode, we're going to talk about the partnership between an author and their secret weapon, an invested editor, one who has skin in the game. Welcome to Coffee with the Authors, where we share the things we've learned, often the hard way, about the craft and business of writing. What does an editor actually bring to the project? Well, an editor does a whole lot more than just edit. And the number one thing that you want them to bring to your project is the passion that you yourself feel for your own project. So if you have a passion for your project and your editor has a passion for the project, it's almost inevitable that that passion's going to shine through and that the reader will feel it.
I was at an event in Texas at a bookstore with a bunch of aspiring authors, and my editor was actually there with me. We were taking questions, and somebody asked her, "What are you currently looking for?" But the way he asked it was very kind of salesy. Like he used words like marketing and platform and what specific subgenre this particular quarter is on your radar screen, all these kind of salesy words. And she said, "So you're asking me what I'm looking for?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "I'm looking for a good story." And then she said, "When I read ROAD RASH, I wasn't looking for a book about a young male protagonist who is in a band. I wasn't looking for a book about musicians at all. I was just looking for a good story. I read that. I fell in love with the characters. I thought, if I like this, other people will like this too." So we acquired the book. And it was kind of that simple. It's almost like it was a mic drop, like good story, boom, the end. Of course, there are more details they add. If it's a YA editor and you send them an adult science fiction novel, that's probably not going to be for them. The most important thing to an editor when they're looking to acquire authors, besides the good story, assuming they have 10 authors in front of them and they all have equally good stories, really the most important factor of all is a willingness to revise.
Before I sold my first book, that manuscript found its way onto an editor's desk, and the editor liked the voice, she liked the story, but there were things that she
liked the writing too.
She liked the writing.
She loved the writing. She loved the writing.
But there were things that frustrated her about it, like my main character took too many asides that went nowhere. So she wrote me this editorial letter, and she said, "If you're willing to cut it in half, I'm willing to look at it again." Okay, cut it in half? No, I'm not going to cut it in half. I mean, there's a reason I wrote all those words. But I'd been trying to get published for a long time, and cutting it in half, although it seemed brutal, I realized that I needed to take another look at this. It had been a while since I looked at that manuscript. So I did cut it in half, and I resubmitted it, and it became my first book.
That's like the monster of all R&R. It wasn't cut it in half and I'll publish it. It was
no, I'll look at it again.
I'll look at it again.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of work for no promises, but the door was open, at least partly open. So you might as well try to kick that damn thing open and get in and see what's going on. For the 909 project, my agent said it to the woman who became the editor. The answer is always no until it's yes. But this was kind of like, I really like this. I wonder how Mark would address the following, because she didn't know me at all. And she had, 3 or 4 questions about, specific block questions about the book. How would Mark address this? And I wrote back a couple thousand words about how I would address each of those different questions and had my agent send it back to her. And she looked at it and she said, "Okay, good." And a week later, we had a contract.
So she could tell that you were someone who was willing to roll up your sleeves and get to work on something, and that you could take editorial direction.
I think that's the whole point. So I don't know that she sat around for half an hour reading in great detail all my ideas, because she was incredibly busy. She was actually the publisher of the imprint. But I think she got the idea, okay, he can take direction, he'll go to work and do some work. Really, fundamentally, editors are the best readers in the world. They read broadly, they read deeply, they can analyze what's working and what's not working, and then they can articulate that to you. Right, in a way that makes sense to the author. And what they don't do is rewrite your work for you. What they will do is they will broad suggestions. Oh, this could be tighter. I think these 2 plot points could be different. Or we can condense them into one. We need some more motivation for this particular character. And then they leave it up to you, the writer, to figure out the actual granular details of doing that.
But that global view of your work can really make your work shine. It's always astounding to me how it takes me 300 pages to fulfill the theme and to have the story unfold. And so you have that emotional resonance at the end, or you understand what the story's about. And my editor can just take it and boil it down to a few sentences that just, I'm like, yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Because she's so
amazing.
good at that.
That's their magic skill.
A lot of people assume that what editors do is the things that a copy editor does. In reality, an editor and a copy editor, their roles are really quite different.
A copy editor does a lot of things, but mainly SPG, spelling, punctuation, and grammar, and continuity, and all those fact-checking, and all those kind of Boolean linear things that have to be correct in a book. Whereas an editor primarily does big picture stuff. They do structural editing. They look at the book as a whole. Does it work as a story? Is the character likable? Is the dialogue believable? Or are all the motivations something that seem realistic? They're looking at big picture stuff. And they also, early on during the acquisition phase, or right before that, they have to look at where is this going to sit in the marketplace. So they kind of have this big 30,000-foot overview of the story and how it's structured and how it should work. Whereas a copy editor, which we're going to talk about later, is a much more granular task.
What an editor does is so expansive. And we're going to do a whole episode on all the things that an editor actually does. But the editor comes into the picture from acquisition through revision. It has a role in the art design. There are a bunch of things that they do. The copy editor comes in the latter stages of the process of getting the text in shape to go to the printers. So they don't really overlap much at all. We're really grateful for the copy editors.
Oh, yeah.
I call them the comma queens or the comma kings because they're just so knowledgeable about all those things, but they will also catch you if you misspelled Shakespeare or something that would be terribly embarrassing. So we love the copy editors, although agonizing about the placement of a comma can get pretty tedious sometimes.
Speaking of copy editors, you absolutely do want to make sure that all of your spelling and punctuation grammar is correct as much as possible before you submit your manuscript to an agent or an editor. But 1 or 2 typos in the middle of 100,000 words is not going to make or break the acquisition of your story.
We'll be discussing how to make a short list of big 5 editors that may be interested in your work in another episode. But meanwhile, we hope you've gotten something useful out of this episode. Thank you for coming and sharing a cup of coffee with us. And remember, dream big, work hard, don't give up.
Keep writing. I don't blame you. You can slap me if that happens.